Okay, I got sound.
You heard that, right?
I did.
Jack Ensch
Okay, tip
interview.
the top of the slate toward me. It's all flare. There you go.
Jack Ensch interview, take 2.
Got it. Okay, hang on just a sec.
Okay. Let me know when you're set, Bill.
Yeah, I'm gonna just tap on this guy. Good.
So you were talking about the shoot down that day.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I think I was talking about the missile going off, and
You had actually dodged.
I had dodged a couple others that we successfully evaded, and one we didn't see went off above the cockpits. I had my hand up in the hand hold here, fighting the G's we were pulling and operating the chaff and other stuff over here on the console. And the missile went off, and the shrapnel and the shards from the canopy shards and shrapnel from the missile came through and partially severed my thumb. Like I said, I came back a little short-handed, and so the next thing I remember was laying in my lap with bleeding all over myself, and I remember I said, "Oh my God, no!" And I think embodied in that was the fact that I suddenly realized that this was happening to me. You know, it was always going to be the other guy, and suddenly it was happening to me. And I don't know why I remember that, but oh my God, no! I said, and I went on the ICS and said to Mike in front, I said, "Mike, can we get to the water? Can we get to the water?" Because we were only about 10 miles in by the time this happened. And obviously, if you could get back out of the water before you had to eject, you had a better chance of being picked up. And he didn't answer, and I looked up down the side of the cockpit. You could see on either side of the cockpit there was an opening to you could see the front cockpit by looking on either side of his ejection seat. And I looked forward, and I realized that Mike was not flying the airplane at that point because he was kind of slumped forward in his cockpit, and we were going down toward a rice paddy. We were maybe 3,000 or 4,000 feet above the ground, and we were doing close to 400 miles an hour, and about 30 degrees nose down. And I realized that we were just seconds away from crashing. So I reached down with my good hand to the lower ejection handle between the seats and ejected us both from the airplane. The F4 had what we call command ejection, so either by turning a certain valve in the back seat, which we always flew active when we were in combat, either cockpit could eject both seats. And the rear seat went out first, and then the pilot's seat. The next thing I recall was I can remember the kick in the butt of the ejection, taking me out of the cockpit, and then I guess I probably blacked out for a minute or a few seconds, because the next thing I remembered was hanging in my chute and looking down, looking at the rice paddy starting to come up to meet me. And I looked around and I saw my chute and looked up automatically. The training automatically kicks in. I mean, I started doing the things that I was supposed to do. Look up, I got a good chute. Yeah, I got a couple panels ripped out, but I got a good chute. I look around, start assessing your landing area, see where you're going to land. Reaching for my radios to make a radio call to my wingman to let them know that I was alive, because you wanted them to know that. And I realized that I couldn't reach my radio here. I kept my radios in my survival vest here, and I looked down to see why my hand wasn't doing what my computer was telling it to do to get my radio. And I realized that both elbows had been dislocated in the ejection, high-speed ejection, low altitude. And when I hit the wind stream, I couldn't control my arms, and they flailed. And both elbows were dislocated and pushed about halfway up on the inside of each arm. And of course, this bloody stump, blood and thumb were hanging here, and I couldn't do anything, and I couldn't make a call. So next thing I remember was hearing some strange noises going by me, like and I looked down, I realized that the people on the ground, my welcoming committee, were shooting at me. And a bit of a panic, but I thought, well, this is it. Luckily, it was I wasn't in the chute very long because it was very low altitude, and either that or they weren't very good shots, or a combination of both. But anyway, I didn't get hit, so I landed in the rice paddy, and my head went underwater, and I had fought it out, and then kind of inched my way over. I landed near one of those walkways that separate the paddies into different sections, and propped my head up against the walkway and watched the water around me continue to spurt as it continued to shoot at me, laying there in the rice paddy. And I pretty much at that point, I just started saying my prayers and giving myself to the Lord, because I thought, this is it. I'm finished. And then the shooting stopped, and I heard them sloshing through the water. And one of them peeked over at me, and he said something in Vietnamese. I don't know, like, okay, come on, he's no threat or something. I don't know. I don't speak Vietnamese. But he and several others came and dragged me up on the walkway, and they stripped me of all my equipment, took my boots, my flight suit, my gear, and everything down to my shirt and my shorts, t-shirt, underwear, and put me in a kind of netting thing at, I guess, I don't know what it was. Anyway, picked me up, a stick on it, and they carried me over to the dry land and put me in underneath a little hut, a bamboo hut with open board sides and a roof over it. And I was shot down. It was late. That was my second mission of the day. We had been on a bombing mission earlier in that morning up near Haiphong, bombing some petroleum area, I think it was. And so this was a second hop of the day. And we were shot down about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, I guess, in August. So it was starting to get dark. I mean, it was coming into dusk. And they took me over there and put me into this, on the ground under this hut. And I do remember looking around. I've seen a lot of faces and people. I was a curiosity, I guess. Maybe I was the first one they'd ever captured. I don't know. And I remember an old gentleman kind of held my head up like that, and he gave me some liquid, which I think was a weak tea of some kind, and gave me some liquid. And then a young Vietnamese lady, she had like a first aid kit, like something like you might carry in your car or something, and she took my thumb, which was partially severed, as I said, and tucked it back into the palm of my hand and wrapped it around and around and around with gauze, and so that it would stop flopping around and start soaking up the blood. And then after dark, they put me onto a board or something and took me down, I would say maybe a mile away from where I was shot down a trail until we got to a paved road. And waiting there was a truck with some military uniformed military personnel, because these people were just kind of in the block pajama type and conical hats, and they were just local people, militia, I guess, I don't know. They turned me over to the uniformed military, and they blindfolded me and put me in the back of the truck, and we took off and drove then the rest of the night up Highway 1, I guess. And I ended up in the Hanoi Hilton Wallow prison. And so we made one stop along the way, I remember that. They took me out of the truck and took the blindfold off and took me into the building of some kind. And there was a big room, like a meeting room or something, and they had me sitting in the middle of the room on a stool. And a lot of people in there was crowded, and they were taking pictures and looking at me. And one gentleman, like he must have been the head guy or the mayor or whatever, I don't know. And he spoke some English, French accented English, and made some kind of a speech about what a terrible person I was, bringing destruction to their country, and I was a war criminal, etc., etc. I don't remember all the stuff. I just kind of I was kind of in a daze, and I do remember him saying something about Jane Fonda had visited his city, and she would tell the American people what was truly going on in Vietnam or something like that. So, but those kind of bits and pieces that I remember of that little incident. They blindfolded me and then took me back in the truck, and then ended up in Wallow prison. Put me in a room somewhere near the gate. I don't remember exactly where. I mean, I was pretty much in shock by this point, and not really knowing. But it's amazing how much I can remember of little things that went on there. And then put me into this room, and it was I don't know, 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 foot room or something. And there was a desk, a chair, a stool, and a waste can over in the corner where your human waste would be deposited if you needed to be. And they took the blindfold off and just threw me on the floor, concrete floor, and left and went out and locked the door and just let me lay there. And so I wondered, well, what the hell's going to happen now? I'm laying there and both elbows dislocated and a big mass of bloody gauze around my left hand. And so I'm laying there so then a little while later, I'd say maybe an hour, door opened, came in, the guards came in, grabbed me by my arms, made me sit on a stool. Interrogating officer came in and sat down at the chair behind the desk, opened his book, and he started interrogating me, asking me questions. And I gave him name, rank, serial number, date of birth, as required by the Code of Conduct. Then he started asking me more questions past that about what squadron was I from, what ship was I from, who was my commanding officer, what was his name, what kind of targets are being targeted up here in the next few days that you know about, things like that. And I just kept telling him, I said, I can't tell you that. I'm just required to give you a name, rank, number, and date of birth. And he kept insisting that I had to tell him more. So, and I resisted. I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And this went on for, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes or so back and forth to that. And so he closed the book, stood up, walked out. The guards came over and kicked me off the stool back onto the concrete and closed the door. And I'm left there with my own thoughts and thinking, well, what the hell's going on now? And so several hours later, came back and went the same routine. Onto the stool, questions, tell you, I can't tell you any more than name, rank, cylinder, and date of birth. So please, I need medical attention. I'm badly injured, and please give me some medical attention as required by the Geneva Convention. And they scoffed at that. The Geneva Convention is, we're not at war. You are aggressors, and this is not a war. And things like that. And so I continued to say, well, I can't tell you anymore. Please give me some medical attention. Again, this would go on for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe. Back and forth, yes, no, I can't tell you. Give me this, no, I won't do that. He'd get up, close the book, walk out, back on the floor. And this routine went on for the next 3 days. Around the clock, 24 hours a day, every few hours, come in and go through this again. On my off time, it wasn't always the same interrogator. As I also often said, they had a watch bill, and I was on duty the whole time. And the different ones would come in, and it was always the same routine. More information, can't do it, okay, boom. Please, I need medical attention. And at one point, about through this area toward the end, in between the quiz sessions, I'm trying to take stock of myself, and say, okay, Ensch, what are you going to do here? And I'm looking at myself, as best I can, and like I said, this bloody mess here, and both my elbows scrunched up here, and they were starting to discolor from lack of circulation. And at one point, one of them, when I asked about it, medical attention, he said, we will not give you medical attention until you cooperate with us and answer questions. And he said, you are dying. And he said, and if you don't answer our questions, we'll just let you die. He said, because you have to cooperate first before we can give you medical attention.
I'm sorry, hold on one second, Jack. Someone's speaking out here. I'll just keep letting it roll
Okay.
for a second.
Where is it? Where did it go?
Hey guys, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're conducting an interview with a former POW. Would you mind? Thanks.
It's the bus washing crew.
No.
Okay.
So
You're at this for 3 days.
yeah, so after that when he told me that, he said, you're dying, and we'll just let you die unless you answer questions. After that session, I had a come to Jesus moment, if you will, of myself, and say, okay, Ensch, what are you going to do here? You know the code of conduct. You can't be given more information. But yet I'm thinking about my wife and 3 daughters back home, and obviously I don't want to die, but I'd never died before, but if this was dying, it wasn't much fun. So I thought, well, you got to have a game plan. You got to think of something. So I decided that the next time they came in, I would start answering some of the questions other than the name, rank, cylinder, and date of birth. But I would just lie if I thought it was of any value, if the question had any value or the answer would have any value. And in other times I would just say what it was. And so then he came in the next session, came in, and so, they started. I said, okay, what do you want to know? Well, what squadron are you from? What kind of airplane you fly? What ship you from? Well, I figured, well, hell, they knew all that. I mean, my God, fighter community, a bunch of egotists that we are. We wear it all over ourselves. I had a patch of the F-161 USS Midway. They had my helmet. They had my flight gear. They had the airplane, what was left of it, and it's painted all over there. So, but yet, for some reason, I still couldn't bring myself. And I thought, and he asked what ship you were from, and I said, Constellation. Because the Connie had just left the line and was going back to the United States. And I said, Constellation. And he said, you lie. Oh, crap. He says, Constellation is on way back to the United States. You're from Midway. And I thought, oh, man. And, I'd like to say that I thought, well, I should have said to him, well, hell, if you knew that, why'd you ask me? But I didn't. But, oh, yes, Midway. I said, I'm from Midway. I was on Constellation another time. I got confused. And so then he started asking me some other questions. What kind of missions, what are the targets in the area? And I said, I don't know. I'm a lieutenant. I don't know. I'm not in the planning. I said, I just go where they tell me to go. I don't know anything other than the mission I'm on at the time. And that kind of answer I started giving them. And then they wanted to know who your commanding officer, who your air wing officer. I mean, they knew the setup. They knew the structure of the military. So I certainly I wasn't going to give them that because I was just a lieutenant, and I didn't know anything of any importance to them, and but I had to have something. So I used deploy. I said, okay, my commanding officer was Commander Grosvenor, and he was my commanding officer at one time. Previous to that, he had made captain. He would never be back flying again over North Vietnam or anything like that. But I didn't want to give a name that I couldn't remember again. And in the Navy, in naval aviation, your skipper is always your skipper, no matter how many you have. You always remember your commanding officer, whatever squadron, many squadrons you're in. He's always the skipper. So I thought that I wanted to remember. I'd use real names that I knew would never, ever be exposed again. Because if I gave the real name and he got shot down, they would know that he was high up in the rank, and he would really get the go over, So I used when they asked for real names, I used names from my past three detours over there of commanding officers that I'd had who had gone on past that and would never come back again. So that if they ever came back and asked me again, which they did, that was some of their ploy, would come back and ask you the same questions and make sure that the two answers jibed, which they did at one time with me. And luckily, that ploy worked. And as far as, they wanted to know what formations we flew and that, and I just made things up. And that session lasted long, and he's writing all this stuff down. And so that session ended, and again, the routine, up, back on the floor, out the door. And the next time they came in, they blindfolded me, took me up, and took me out of the room and took me out of the prison someplace, I think, because I remember hearing opening and several doors and gates, and took me to some kind of medical facility there in Hanoi, I guess, a hospital or something, I don't know. Maybe the same one John McCain was treated at, I don't know. And my next memories of being taken into an operating room or something I guess, operating room. I was strapped down to a table. They put leather straps across by my ankles and thighs and my torso, and several physician's assistants, I'll call them, came in with the surgeon and held my head and my arm, my shoulders, and everything in place, and the doctor pulled my arm over and looked at it and took all the gauze away and everything like that. And the next thing I know is he's got a scalpel and he starts amputating what's left of my thumb. And no anesthetic, no nothing, just, and they're holding me in place. And I'd like to say I did a John Wayne and said, hey, Pilgrim, what are you doing, but oh my God, I can remember a flash of pain, just like a lightning bolt across my eyes as he started cutting into there and hitting the nerves. And I screamed, please, please, give me something to stop the pain. And he made a comment, something to the effect of, no need. You have caused suffering in our country. Now it's time for you to experience suffering. Okay, so that's nice bedside manner, huh? Anyway, he finished that, and they packed the wound with gauze and stuff. I don't know what they did, but then they wrapped it all up, unstrapped me from the table, and took me to another room. And they took some kind of, what do they call it, a fluoroscope, I guess, like a preceder to X-rays. Anyway, kind of little pictures of my elbows, and he held them up and looked at them for a few minutes, and then put them down. And there was a chair over against the wall, and his assistants took me over there and held me in place again in that chair. And he came over and he put his foot in my chest and started taking my arms and twisting and pulling until they snapped back into the joints, and wrapped them up in some rudimentary splints, blindfolded me, and then took me back and put me in that same room where I was being interrogated. And I spent another, I guess, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 days there. And then they moved me from there into an area of the Hanoi Hilton we called Camp Unity, which was the area where all the big prisons personnel cells were around outside. And there was a little bamboo hut in the middle there where they'd used as a quiz room. They would bring guys out there to interrogate them, and they put a board and on some sawhorses, and that was my bed there, and had a table and a chair, and they left some writing material, papers and a pen, and they told me I was to write my biography and write my confession as a war criminal for my deeds in flying in Vietnam. And of course I feigned. I said, well, I can't use my arms. I can't write right here. So I was in there. Then I spent the rest of about 30 days in isolation, solitary, if you will, both in that quiz room and in the little bamboo hut. And one day they caught, the guard would come in with my food, put it on the table, and then leave. And one day he forgot to close the door completely, and there was a gap, and I could look out the gap in the open door where it was ajar, and I could see room 7 of those ones going around me, and there were some POWs in that room. And of course, everybody in the complex knew that there was a new guy had just come in but they didn't know who I was, or, they knew that I was. I guess they had heard my screams of pain and everything. I've heard later talk to some of the guys and said, yeah, we heard you, but we didn't know who the hell you were, but we knew you weren't enjoying it very well, in a lot of pain. And I don't remember the moaning and screaming. I guess I did, but while I was in that interrogation room. Anyway, they caught me communicating with these guys. And so it was almost as if they screamed and hollered. And a few minutes later they came and took me out of that room, out of that bamboo hut, and put me in a room, what we called room 5, back there. I was in with a bunch of other POWs then, about 40 of us. And it was almost as if, well, once they saw that I had communicated with the prisoners there, that my exploitation value had evaporated. So I would be getting the information, how to resist or whatever. I don't know, but that seemed to be it. Once you made contact with the other POWs that were there, okay, value shot. So let's put him in with them now. And I ended up in that room, and well, all the time I'm after I got that medical attention and started getting my wits back about me, and I started feeling terrible about what I'd done. I had broken the code of conduct. I'd given him more than name, rank, serial number, and date of birth, and so I laugh about my good Catholic upbringing. I had sinned, and I felt, well, I'd failed. I hadn't lived up to the code of conduct, and it really started eating at me. And so I thought, well, what a weak person you are. You pride yourself at being in the fighter community and a big killer and all this stuff, and you can't even stand up to a little bit of pain and threats of, okay, so you were going to die, they said. Well, okay. So the first thing I did when I got into that big room with the other POWs, I sought out the senior resident officer, the SRO, who was the senior officer in every cell, was in charge of that cell. That was the system we set up. And that the SRO in that room at the time was a gentleman.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is your foot on the edge of the
Oh,
table there or something?
Oh, it was, yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Just careful, because I don't want to interrupt your story
Okay.
with bad sound.
It was a gentleman named Colonel Joe Kittinger, Air Force. He was an F4 guy, and he'd been shot down several months before me there in '72. And I went to him and I said, "Sir," I said, I'm terrible." And I was actually had tears in my eyes. I said, I broke a code of conduct. I said, I gave more than name, rank, so I could get medical attention, and I feel terrible about it. And, I just, and Joe, he called me, he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "Jack," he said, "we all did." He said, "Everybody has a breaking point, and they can make you say what they want. So don't worry about it." He says, "You're okay." And so it was, I went to confession, get absolution, and sure enough, that was made me feel better. But it's still, even afterwards, years later, you still think, would they really have let me die? I don't think so. Maybe in retrospect, but at the time, in the moment, I didn't think about that. I didn't realize that. Well, they're not going to let you die because you're a pawn. You're a bargaining chip. And another. But nonetheless, I got absolution, and then I was in with that same group of POWs for the rest of my stay up there. We moved around from room to room as a group, and finally, after the B-52s came in, and the peace agreement was signed in January of '73, my group moved
Trash
over.
truck.
Hold on, yeah, 1 second till this truck gets by.
We'll go back to moved around to room.
Yeah,
After. 1 second, let's wait till it accelerates away. Okay. So
after the peace agreement was signed, and they started moving POWs around by shoot down date, because that was by the peace accords, the agreement was that we would be released by shoot down day, first in, first out, last in, last out. And me being one of the FNGs, new guys, I would be released in the latter part of the release segments, and as my group was. And so we were moved from one cell to another, and they put us over in one corner of the Hilton we called it New Guy Village. And we heard the fogs, the old-time POWs being brought back in, because they were using the Hilton then as the release point for the long-time guys. And we were moved then over to another prison the next day after the guys from Dogpatch came back in and took over our old cells. Then we were moved out of New Guy Village and trucked over to a prison called the Zoo. We called the Zoo, in another one in the Hanoi area, and that's where we were released from by shoot down date. So I spent the rest of my time over there until we came home. I came home with the last group of POWs on 29 March 1973 was the last flight out, and so that was my adventure.
Beautiful, Jack. Beautiful. So let's take apart a little bit, deconstruct a little bit down. When you're moved in, once you've communicated, the silence has been broken. You are no longer as pliable an asset to them, because they realize through hard experience that once the rest of the prisoners can communicate with you, they can support you and teach you the ropes and everything else. So once you have this communication, you're moved into
Room 5.
Room 5, the prison community. At this point, you will be now experiencing the lives that the other POWs have been living for years. And your perspective on that, I think, is important for us to see, because as a military man, as a man trained for this, to the degree one can be trained for such an experience, but prepared to the extent that you were, that you knew that there were POWs being held. Your fresh vantage point is what I would like to explore now. What did you see? How did you first experience this sort of solidity of leadership going on, of military organization? Like, what was your first experience? These guys were obviously, I think at this point in the war, they were getting more food. They were not as emaciated.
Yep.
Torture, the extreme torture had stopped.
Yeah.
With
The systematic torture was gone.
yeah, but you're going to have to learn all this. So take me in fresh viewpoint and show me through your eyes what you, and also people are going to come to you for information. They're going to want to know who won the World Series, all these things. And you're going to learn things by their questions as well. Yeah. So talk to me about that.
Well, the group I was in were shoot downs as recently as a year earlier, so we were still the new guy group, but we communicated with the room 4, 3. That's where guys like Ed Martin and Orson Swindle and McCain and Ev Alvarez and the longtime guys were in those. and through the communication system, they passed information to us through the tap code, the flash code, and by voice if we could, you know, bringing us up to speed about how, what to expect, how to resist, you know, how to avoid getting detected, communicating and this kind of stuff. So they were educating us to the prison system, and us in return we were passing to them the latest information that we had brought into the prison about what things like you know, the some of the guys had been there and they didn't even know that we had landed on the moon in 1968. I mean, that's how sparse the information was early on for them getting there, and
Hold on one second.
things that.
Move this table out a little bit, just.
Oh, here I'll just
No,
shift.
that's our fault. Bill, would you
Go
hold on
ahead.
a second? Yeah, I just want to get this away.
I keep hitting it with my foot.
Yeah, and it's,
And,
before we come back.
you should back up. We landed on the moon in '69.
Yeah. 69. Yeah.
69.
Excuse me.
It was the year I graduated high school.
Okay.
Minor detail, but you might as well,
You're right.
they can edit around and get it correct. Go ahead.
So we were giving them information that, for instance, some of the old FOGs, POWs, didn't even realize that we had landed on the moon in 1969. That's how sparse the information was that they had at that time. So when new guys started coming in there, we could fill them in on a lot of stuff that they had not known about since their shoot time. And
Give us some examples of that, in addition to landing on the moon.
well, for instance, what their wives had been doing about forming the League of Wives, and doing protesting to the Vietnamese embassy, and going to Paris, and we brought him in, told him about the POW bracelets business, about how people were wearing their bracelets in memory of them,
And was there any feedback mechanism whereby you could see the impact that information would have on them?
oh yeah, that was for instance, I had met Sybil Stockdale when she first started the wives thing back in when I was at Pax River. I was the aide to the admiral there, in his previous job before he came down to Pax River to take over the commander of Naval Test Center. He had been the public affairs officer for CHINFO, Chief of Naval Information for the Navy, and Sybil and the other wives he had worked with them up there when they were. So they had a big air show every year at Patuxent River, and Sybil came down there at the invitation of Admiral Miller, and spoke to people about what they were doing, and to try to raise support for that. And so I met her there, and I got to, not close intimate, but got to know her and found out what she was doing, because I was the aide and I was in on all that stuff. And I passed that kind of information through the communications system there to Admiral Miller, to Admiral Stockdale, that his wife was very active in this, and that she and the boys were doing well, just as, of course, that. And some of the guys that were shot down knew some of the old POWs, and they brought them up to speed about what they knew about their families, and recent information, not in a letter possibly maybe years old that the Vietnamese finally let the guy have or something like that. So those kind of things, and sporting events like you mentioned like who won the World Series last year, or it just they were starving for any kind of information other than what the Vietnamese would tell them about, and what usually the information about the United States that the Vietnamese were willing to share were floods and riots and what was going on in the streets of hurricanes and destruction and anything bad that was going on in the United States. Well, this is what's going on, and the anti-war demonstrations and all that kind of stuff. So any good news, any fresh news that we could pass on to them, we went in. Even things like telling them about the change in razors. That was the era when they started coming out. Gillette started coming out with the twin blade, the I don't know what the hell they call it, a 2-track or whatever, and track. And because these guys, when they were shot down, and what we used there in the prison system that they provided to us, that they would let us shave every once in a while, were the old like the Gillette blue blades, that you screw them in like that, and you just hope that when it was your turn to shave that you got at the head of the line instead of the last of the line, because they were good for about one shave, and or else they just pulled them out by the roots, and things like that, and telling them about fashions, mini skirts and just stuff like that they were just starved for. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Short shorts, and mini skirts, and wow, this that, and everything. So any kind of new information, they just absorbed like a sponge, because it was this is what's happening, and they couldn't believe the guys running around with long hair, and of course we came in. This was in the 70s, 72, and the fashions then were the long sideburns, the Elvis sideburns, and we were going back to almost the 50s, with the ducktails and the long sideburns and all that stuff, and the Navy had lessened the restrictions that you could have your hair longer and sideburn during the Admiral Zumwalt era. And, they couldn't believe that kind of stuff. What? My God, what are you guys doing with those long sideburns, Hey, well, it's okay now. So that kind of information it seems trivial when you talk about it today, but that was.
Hold on 1 second, Jack.
Yeah,
Is that a plane?
Helicopter. It's coming. Getting a little hotter, so it'll be slow down here a little bit. Just a moment here.
Yeah, sure. You can use this here too.
Yeah, that's okay. All right.
Okay, so sideburns you were talking about.
Yeah, and just stuff that seems trivial maybe when you talk about it today, but it was new information to them, and it was something that really they were just hungry for any kind of information about what was going on in the United States since they had left, and so it boosted their morale. And then at one point, I'm going to say it's probably in October, sometime in October, the Camp Unity, as we called it, that big section where all people were on, the cells opened out onto the courtyard. But what the Vietnamese had done was constructed 2x4 inner wall courtyards for each cell, and they had like tar paper to keep you from, so that when they'd come in and let you out for your food or to bathe once a week or whatever, and a big horse troughs of water outside each cell, they would let that cell out and get your food or whatever like that, come back in, lock you up, and then let the other. So they tried to even separate each cell from one another. And at one point, I think it was in October, lo and behold, if they didn't come in, and they took down all of those inner like courtyards, if you will, for each cell, and made it all, opened it all up again. And one day they came in and they unlocked all the cells at one time and let us walk out and meet. And the old guys could come over and the new guys, and we got to meet out in the courtyard. And I mean, that's when people just started talking and filling people in. And that's, first time I ever met John McCain and Ev Alvarez was in that particular thing. I mean, everybody was, oh, hey, how you doing? I'm Jack Ensch. Yeah, we heard about you. You were that guy in the bamboo hut there for a while. And yeah, Ev Alvarez, I knew who he was, I even told Ev a joke at that time. And Ed Martin and Orson Swindle and guys that had been there a long time. And we just mixed it up, and they let us do that for a couple of days. And then the peace talks broke down again, and then I went back to the old way. They didn't put up the inner card or 2x4 and tar paper compartments again, but they locked us up and we went cell out at a time. And then the B-52s came in December, and then after that it was we started sorting out. But that was, what a day that was. The first time that everybody got to mix out there at one time. I met Coley Haynes there, and Coley Haynes and I had, back in Miramar, we had been handball players together. He was in VF. He was an F8 photo driver, and I was in VF 21 at the time, back in 60, 67, 68 time frame. And he and I were handball opponents. We'd play handball all the time over there. And last handball game we had, and he said, hey, I'm deploying now. I'm going to be gone. I'll see you when I get back, Okay, see you, Coley. And well, he didn't come back. Of course, then I finished my tour, went back to River, came back and did 2 more tours, and lo and behold, the next time I see him is that many years later in the courtyard of the Hanoi Hilton. Hey, Coley, how's your handball game? And and I said, well, I'm gonna have a little trouble with handball right now with my left hand. So that was wow, what an exciting time, especially for those guys, getting all this contact with the fresh meat, if you will, coming in, and they just trying to pick our brains for everything that they could get about what was new to going on in the United States.
That's a really important moment. I agree. Let's deconstruct that a little bit more, because here you have the perspective of only being there for a few months, couple months. Prior to that, you were on a ship. These guys have been in there for years, and they've had to grow their own culture.
Mm-hmm.
When we interviewed Jim Stockdale Jr., he talked about how his dad lived in absolute fear that once he got back, he would be court-martialed for altering the military code of conduct. He had made those changes for the benefit of his men, faced with the very real circumstances on the ground. And absolutely every single one of you went through the exact same experience. Am I going to die here, and my wife and kids are going to be without a husband and father? And it's like, at what point is the point of, I know the information I have is limited, At what point do I make a decision to take the initiative and the risk and the moral injury to not fulfill the letter of the law, but instead find a new way to resist, find a new way to adapt, find a new way to, but as you have talked about, there was a moral cost to that, a great deal of felt personal shame. And a personal shame you could only find redemption in other POWs.
Mm-hmm.
They're the only ones who truly understood
Yeah.
how he felt. So when the walls came down inside the camp and you started to be able to freely mix, what did you learn about the experiences these men had gone through? What did you find out, like, oh, that's different? Like when you went to I can't forget the leader's name, but your SRO and had your confessional, you learned something. He said, we have all been here.
Yeah.
We've all done this. What did you learn when the walls came down? And because they've communicated primarily by tap code and hand signals up till now. Now they're freely able to talk, and exchange information.
Mm-hmm.
But you would see, wow, these guys really, these old grizzled warriors have done this and this or this, or this is new. And what did you find in your fresh eyes experience there?
Well, from the point of standing up to the code of conduct, I found out that just like Joe Kittinger told me, says, hey, everybody has reached that point, and I found out that that they, the old guys, and some of them I talked to then, I again kind of confessed again, I guess, if you will, for gee whiz, and to almost all, not almost, but to a man, it was always to say, hey, we understand, and we went through a lot of torture, and eventually we had to capitulate too, but it doesn't make you a lesser man because of that. If nothing else, it's their point was that as long as you don't, you trip that once, you pick yourself up, and the next time just don't lay down again. Okay, you have to, from that point on, if they want more, they're going to have to go right back down to square one and build up again, and bring you to that breaking point again. Don't just capitulate just because you did it once. And luckily, I was there the last 7 months of the war, so that kind of systematic torture to get nothing really. All they wanted to prove was that they could make you do it, and then some. Unfortunately, some of the POWs they cooperated without even any interrogation or torture, but that's just human nature. I mean, we're a microcosm of society, and there are people in society who are weak and can't do things, and in that microcosm of our POW population, we had the same percentage probably of people who couldn't do it too, and it's unfortunate. But that's something I took. Well, wow, I'm just lucky I didn't have to spend 7 years there. Like if I'd have been shot down on my first cruise in 1966, I would have been there 7 years. I shot down in 72, it's the last 7 months of war, so I traded 7 years for 7 months, that's a pretty good return on investment, if you will. So I was very fortunate to do that. But talking to them and them explaining to us that hey, this is everybody did this, and they also told us how to how to cope with and resist if we got, because even at that time they would call guys out for quizzes, as we called them. Quizzes very hard to study for because you didn't know what the subject matter was, but even then they would call guys out, and so they they gave you information about that and information about the various guards and their personalities and what you could get by with and couldn't get by with certain ones. Some of them were very, rigid, and others, they didn't want to be there any more than we did. They were guards, but they weren't really, their heart wasn't in it. And some of those guys, like Soft Soap Ferry and these guys, that they were doing it just because they had to do it. So they gave us information about how to cope with the new environment that we were experiencing, and we gave them information about what was going on in the environment that they had left and been away from for so many years.
Great. How about take a look at this? Are you good to go a little longer?
Yeah.
Great. Do you need to use the restroom or anything?
Yeah, I'm good. I only had one cup of coffee this morning, so I knew I was going to be sitting there for a while.
I think this subject of shame and redemption from failure, the feeling of failure, is a really important one. One of the challenges facing today's modern military is treatment of PTSD, returning warriors
Yeah.
who feel that they are perhaps not performed the way they wanted, or is not as strong as their buddies, or they've seen horrors and they can't. And it begins to feel like they are isolated. And one of the most difficult things in the treatment of PTSD is to communicate what all of you learned. It's that actually by having each other that you can heal, that you can find self-forgiveness as well as forgiveness for each other. It's in the community of warriors that the real understanding exists. No one can speak the language of what you went through like someone who went through it. What's remarkable is that, and I so appreciate, Jack, your honesty, that being able to freely talk about the shame you felt and the self-defeat. What's remarkable in its own way is that the amount of torture one took and experienced becomes a kind of badge of courage, and even to this day, and I would like to get this on camera where you talk about going back to the POW reunions at times, and at least in the beginning you'd feel like, wow, I don't really deserve to be here. I was only
7 months.
7 months. As if 7 months of your life lost to, and your thumb lost to, and your elbows dislocated. What strikes me is by all the time when, there was a moral and a psychological victory won by the POWs every day they resist, and I couldn't be prouder to have been part of listening to the stories I have. This has been the greatest experience of my life professionally, without question, the greatest honor. But during those 7 years when others were incarcerated, you were flying missions. You were flying continual missions. Every single day you were taking the risk to life and limb, to fly for your country and resist and be a warrior in the war. So each time, I know that on some level you lived in a little bit of a disassociation from it. You didn't think it was going to happen to you. But on the other hand, when you've got MiGs coming at you on your 6, that's, the adrenaline's up, your life is at risk and you're aware of that.
Yeah.
And you go out the next day. You don't say, I can't do this. You say, so each day you were recommitting as a warrior. And yet, when you get to this prison system, there's a part of you that feels like maybe I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And yet, you have been serving your country faithfully for years, So, the truth is something different than the shame we feel for our individual ideas of failure. The truth is a bigger picture, that there were warriors fighting a battle behind bars, and there were warriors fighting a battle in front of three of those bars. And you did this together. So I'd like to go a little bit in your perspective now. examining the shame and the failure you felt, and as you learn about the shame and failure these other guys felt, where were the cracks where you started to actually not just in words forgive yourself, but start to get some kind of perspective? Like, the truth is, you're a hero to your wife and your daughters because you said, I'm going to make a choice to come home to you. I'm not going to belly up and just give them everything they want, but at a certain point, you're going to be important enough to me that if I weigh this against, they're not going to get anything out of me that's going to change the war, but you're going to get something, I'm going to come home to you.
Mm-hmm.
So put this all in perspective for me, because it's got to be a process that all of these guys eventually, because the ones that are healthiest that we've met have made, even though that still winces when they say I gave up, I broke.
Yeah.
That's still a wince to this day. And there's a wince in these guys, in these young men and women with PTSD. Can we address that? Can we find our way into that? Talk to me about that, please.
Well, in my case, like I said, I had, I kind of beat up with myself for capitulating and not living up to the code. And then I was reassured by Kittinger and others that, hey, it's okay, everybody did it, but it's still not okay. I mean, it was still not okay because you didn't feel like I didn't feel like, okay, well, you said it's okay, and so in the perspective of others, I'm okay, but inside it's still, just, again, I'll go back to my Catholic upbringing. Even though you can go to confession for your sins, that doesn't mean that those sins didn't happen. But you get absolution from them. And just because everybody says, okay, we all did it, and that doesn't mean that my giving up didn't happen. It still happened. So that's still in there. That's still there that I didn't quite measure up. And in my case, I came back, and of course, I was worried about the ego, of course, of I come back a cripple because I found out just several years ago that I'm the only amputee that came back. I'm the only POW that was released that had anything cut off. Guys came back with like Stockdale's bad leg and various guys with broken, twisted bones and McCain's bad shoulders or anything like that. But I'm the only one that had anything cut off. I came back, albeit kind of minor, except it's kind of hard to pick your nose now. But I was the only one that, and so I came back, and I'll admit that I was, this is maybe related to this, the code of conduct thing, but the shame. There's a shame internally that I didn't know, okay, it still nags at you today, even that, maybe, like I say, why, would they really have let me die? And thinking of it today, no, I didn't realize it, but I was a valuable token for them, even, as a POW. But I wasn't thinking that at the time. So even today, I'm thinking, well, I could have just said, no, I'm not going to do anything, and they're still going to give me that medical attention. But I didn't know it at the time. Okay. So, and then the shame, and then I come back, and I'm all busted up, and my thumb's gone, and the ego of, the fighter pilot image of yourself, I was, I don't want to say it, shame. I was feeling sorry for myself because now I'm a cripple. I can't do what everybody else does. I can't do the things I used to do. I was a fairly good athlete, and I couldn't playing handball was one thing. I didn't do that anymore. But awakening for me, I think, was my younger brother, Leon, who's about 6 years younger than me. And I used to walk around. I came back, and I, got back into the physical therapy, and they fixed what they could, this thing. But I used to walk around all the time. I had my hand in my pocket, and it was, I guess subconsciously, I don't think of myself as actually saying, "Hey, I'm going to put my hand in my pocket," but I used to walk around with my hand in my pocket all the time, and to hide this infirmity that I now have because, first of all, I broke code of conduct, and now I'm a cripple. And one day we were at some place, and Leon said, "Jack, what the hell you always walking around with your damn hand in your pocket for?" I said, "Oh, I don't know." He said, "God damn it, get your hand out of your pocket. You haven't got anything to be ashamed about." He said, "So what? So you lost your thumb. That doesn't change you as a person. You're still the same person you were." I mean, this is from my little brother. And he said, "Get your goddamn hand out of your pocket." Well, okay, he's bigger than I am. And so, when he said that, there's something clicked in me, and I thought, well, yeah, what the hell? I mean, most people don't even notice it. I mean, unless in the normal conversation, how many people walk around and say, "How many thumbs do you have?" That kind of stuff. So that was a cathartic moment for me. And where did it come from? From my little brother. And he said, "So what? You're not anything ashamed about. You should be proud of the fact that, you survived. You came home." And
what do you think that did for you when he said that? How did it find
well, it finally clicked on me that it's not the outward appearances that makes you who you are. It's what's inside. And so many people, that are a hell of a lot more restricted in their physical things than I am, who are just as good a person, and because it's the inside, the outward appearances. That's what we all, our society is. It's all about the glamour and the look and the fighter pilot image and all that stuff. The lack of my thumb doesn't change who I was and who I think I am, and what my values and stuff like that. It's just an outer part of
And
it.
maybe we could connect these dots, because I hear something bigger in this. Because it was a relief for more than just, in a way, showing your hand was showing everything about what happened.
Yeah.
It was showing breaking in that isolation, and you were ashamed of all of it.
Yeah.
And if we could connect up these dots, because what I hear here is who we are is not what we have or don't have in our bodies. That's just one piece of it. But who we are isn't solely judged by just our behaviors, by the events that we maybe won or lost. Because if you see all of the events, 284 missions, what these guys did was admirable. They endured horrible torture, but 284 missions over the course of those years, when you continued to go out mission after mission. That single event, lying for 3 days in that cell, afraid you might not be able to come home to your wife and kids, they might lose a father and a husband, doesn't define you either.
No.
And if you could tie those together, not just about the thumb when your brother gave you something more than just getting your hand out of your pocket.
Yeah, he woke me up to the fact that what we do, what people see us do, is not really who we are. My going back to all those missions and everything, that I'll just say that I kept going back. Some guys didn't go back. Some of them made sure that they got orders, and the next time they got orders, they went to the East Coast, where they would go to the Mediterranean and still back to Vietnam. And I arranged so after my 2 tours in Vietnam and in VF-21, and then I could have gone to Oceania. As a matter of fact, they were going to go send me to Oceania, but and that's where the other F4, the East Coast F4s were at NAS Oceania, and they were going to the Med. And most, having been 2 tours already in Vietnam, I could have gotten out of that. But I made an arrangement with my admiral and said, hey, I want to go back. We're still fighting the war. That's what I signed up to do, is serve my country. And I want to go back. And, Admiral Miller is, well, Jack, you've already done 2 tours. You don't have to go back. I said, I know, but, sir, we've got a war going on. I signed up to serve, and I want to be where the action is. And so I got orders back to Miramar in my 2nd Squadron, at 161, 2 cruises on Midway, and then ended up in POW. So I guess in self-evaluation here, I guess my feeling was that the reason I joined up was to serve my country. And the best way I thought to serve my country was to be engaged in the conflict that was going on at that time. I thought that was my duty. And I didn't want to take the easy way out, if you will, and go back to the East Coast Squadron and go on a med cruise, and go around and visit cons and, all the nice fancy Liberty ports over there. I wanted to be where the action was, because I felt that was my duty, and that's what I'd went to do. So I guess that, and then the result of me doing that was that I went through my own little crucible of, finding out how much I could take and still live up as best I could to the code of conduct, and how much suffering I could experience. But that still, Jack Ensch was more than that. I think I was a good father, a good husband, and a good family. And I think I was a good patriot.
I wish it was not the case. I can't even believe the trash truck is coming right now. Because you're at the core to me.
It's not on our street though, where is it? It's on the side street.
It'll take a moment. You're at the core right now. What's so important? And thank you so much for your emotional honesty about it. You want to cut for a moment?
No, it's gonna leave
Okay.
shortly.
How are we doing on media?
Oh, we're good.
Okay, because this is such a big answer. There are young seamen who are swapping decks on a boat and come back and go, well, I'm not the fighter pilot. There are fighter pilots going to POW reunions going, oh, I'm only a 7-monther, so
Yeah.
I don't deserve. And the truth is, all of us together are serving. And in the end, the real question is, in those 3 words, return with honor. Do you return to your life, whatever it is, from your military service? Have you served with honor? That doesn't mean have you made mistakes.
Yeah.
That means have you committed to even the fact that you questioned yourself about your own courage is a mark of honor. You weren't a fink. You didn't just dismiss it and say, I'm not giving up. I'm not this doesn't trouble me.
No.
Those who aren't troubled by the question are the ones we should be worried about
Yeah.
and afraid of. By being troubled by the question, it meant that you have a code of service that is important to you. And the military will be at its strongest when all of those who swab decks can turn to those who feel they failed under torture or isolation and pain to say to them, hey, listen, we're all in this together. We're all serving together. So I'm just filling in at the moment because
Yeah.
this is such an important moment. When the trash truck leaves, I want to get back.
Yeah, looks like the trash truck is gone. You want
Okay.
to take him back to where he left off?
Yeah. So we were talking about your brother.
Yeah.
We were talking about, and you were saying who you are.
Yeah.
It's not just the ticker tape of your
Yeah.
successes and failures.
Well, yeah, and I'm a product of. I've often said, that the POW experience, the MiG experience, and all that stuff. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes when people make a big deal out of it, and I know it's to in the ethos of the fighter community, this is a big deal, But and I'm not certainly not ashamed of that. I'm proud of my performance because that was the ultimate test. Fighter community is to test yourself in real combat, and I was successful there. But for the grace of God, there could have been somebody else. I mean, I was in the right place at the right time, and we put our training to work, and we were successful. And the same thing with the POW experience. I had some doubts about some of my performance. Okay, but the code of conduct, etc. But it's past it. But I've often said that experience was a part of my life. It wasn't the end of my life, and it was a part of who I am today. Obviously, because of what I went through. But I went on to do other things. Came home, and my 3 daughters. They're all happily married. They all have went through college. They got their degrees. They're good citizens. They're holding down jobs, and they have wonderful homes and everything. So, I consider that a success, as much a success as shooting down the MiGs. I mean, look, we have a beautiful family, and all of them, they've been all married for, Kathy and I have been married for 55 years. Each one of the girls still married to their original husband into their 20s and going into 30 years. The grandkids are growing and going to college and this kind of thing. So that, too, I think reflects favorably on me. And I came back, and I had my own fighter squadron and my own air station command and naval training center command. And I feel like I contributed something to my leadership to touch people there, too. And then afterwards, I went with the San Diego Padre baseball team and established the first and still only military affairs department in all of Major League Sports, and gave back and got them connected. They're arguably known as the most military friendly sports team in all of the nation. So, things like that I, it sounds like, I guess I'm sitting here bragging on myself, but I think of those things as being a part of me as well, not just the MiG shoot downs and the POW thing. And so, I don't know, I'm kind of wandering here, but this idea that we're heroes I know it's a cliche, but it's true. I think the real heroes are those that gave the ultimate sacrifice and didn't come back, like my pilot Mike Doyle, who was a bachelor when he was shot down. He didn't come back to his family, his mother, his father, and his siblings. He didn't have the opportunity to meet the love of his life and raise a family. And so, I'm pretty lucky. So being heroes, I think it's an overused term. And I think a lot of us POWs too a lot of us were kind of a little bit embarrassed by all the adulation that was heaped upon us when we came back. Especially me as a short timer. I mean, I was there 7 months. I wasn't there, 10 years or 8 years like Ev Alvarez or Jim Stockdale and the long time guys. And I still admire them for what they went through. But it was kind of embarrassing to all the falderall that on us coming back, and I finally came to grips with that by I think that we, the POW group, we represented the only tangible thing that our society thought that we got out of the Vietnam War, so that we got our POWs back. And we, quote unquote, lost the war. Not we, the military didn't, the politicians did. But so I kind of gotten over that a little bit but it really bothered me, and I think most of my POW fellow POWs too, to see how we were treated as compared to the average military person coming back from Vietnam, where they'd come through the airports and be spit upon and called vulgar names and stuff like that, and have to sneak into the restroom and change into their civilian clothes because they were ashamed to walk out. And that was a terrible scar on our nation's soul, I think. And so that's how I handled that idea of that. So I finally said, okay, I'm representing all those others that didn't get what we got. When I go out and present myself in the public or anything like that, as former POW, etc., I kind of like to think that any adulation or anything that I might get, I take on behalf of all those who didn't receive it. And thankfully, to this day, and today, I think people are finally realizing that, the average Vietnam, those that served there, didn't get the welcome home that they deserved. They didn't start that damn war. And they went over there just like the rest of us and did the best that they could. And, so that, this idea that all we are, or is what we did in war, is not necessarily, doesn't hold water. I think it's the whole person, is what you did serving your country, and also what you contributed to your community, what you contribute to your family, and what you pass down for your family then to contribute. It's like sourdough bread, okay? You keep passing that piece of sourdough bread, and everybody gets to bake their own bread going down, just like the miners did, Okay, it comes from one stop, but that's the seed, and then it passes on down. And so hopefully, I hope that I have in some way, baked a few loaves of bread for some people along the way.
Beautiful, yeah, beautiful. So I've really held you a long time, but
No, it's okay.
I keep wanting to. What I'd like to tie together then is just a few things. Again, part of what we're trying to do is get a message to someone who's returned from the field of conflict. They feel like they didn't perform the way they wanted to. They're not who they wanted to be, or they're not as strong, or whatever it is, or they've lost limbs and they feel like now they're half a person or a quarter of a person or whatever it is. And the perspective that you're giving, that we are more than our actions, more than the sum total of our actions. We can be more. We can have families. We can to this day you volunteer on the Midway. Maybe you can draw that together. You know, I volunteer on the Midway. It's my way of giving back. I can teach others about some of what we went through. But speak directly to that person wondering whether they're crippled or haven't performed what they were like. Your statement that you are more than, maybe we tie it into those 3 words that by then were, I'm sure, talked about even as late as you were coming, return with honor. That to live an honorable life, to perform as an honorable person is a bigger question than our mistakes, our sum totals of our strengths or weaknesses. It's a whole picture of who we are. You can be an honorable father, you can be an honorable husband, you can be an honorable member of society. If you have made a mistake, fight back. Get out there again tomorrow and look around in the world as a way to fight back, to fight again. So if you could draw some of those, your present working as a docent on the Midway, what your thoughts are about return with honor, and what it is to be an honorable person.
Okay. Well, serving as a docent on the Midway is a real pleasure, and yeah, it's a privilege too, to be able to. Obviously, I have a long relationship with the Great Lake Gray Lady Midway, because I had to do cruises on her, and a lot of my Navy exploits happened while I was on her or with her. But it's a thrill to be aboard and engage people who the first time they've ever been aboard an aircraft carrier, and to explain to them what that, the life aboard a carrier, what it means. It's this 4.5 acres of American diplomacy that you can take anywhere in the world without asking anybody. You don't have to ask them, hey, can I go through the straits of whatever, or can I go to the Indian Ocean, or can I go? We can go anywhere we want. That 4.5 acres of American sovereignty, and that's important. And let them know that people on that carrier, the average age of those that are serving, which is very less than 1% of people to nowadays, they are volunteers, and they're serving their country. And the average age of the crew on a carrier is somewhere between 18 and 20, 21 years of age overall. And they're out there doing a very, very important job and an honorable service for our nation. And they're doing it for us. They're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for the nation. And to explain to them, to the couple from Keokuk, that say, hey, wow, this is a big ship, what do you do? And you explain to them what it means, and hopefully they walk away from there having a better understanding of what service these people are performing for them and for our nation, and getting the best bang for their buck, if you will, if they want to put it in financial terms. And so that it's rewarding to do that, and to give back to your community. I mean, we got a lot of problems in this nation, but we've suffered and endured, and we've overcome a hell of a lot more than what's going on now. If you look at it in the 240 some years, I guess it is now, that we've been a nation. But to me, it's an honorable thing to do. Honor is it's a funny word, TV stars, and they're honored with Oscars, and they're honored for this, and they're honored for that. Honor is to me a word that it's kind of like hero. Sometimes it's used indiscriminately and doesn't really mean what it really should. And being honorable, even when you trip and make mistakes, there's honor in admitting that you made a mistake. And there's honor in getting past that mistake and moving on and not making that mistake again. That's an honorable thing to do. It's not honorable to make a mistake and then deny it and say, oh, well, that didn't happen. That's not honorable. The honorable thing is, hey, I made a mistake, and I'm not going to do that again, and I'm going to move on from that and be honorable the rest of the time. Down the road, I might make another mistake. Well, okay, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, and the honorable thing to do is, so honor is to serve with honor is it's the right thing to do, obviously, but it's honorable to be a good father. It's honorable to give back to your community, to serve in, like I've sat on a lot of non-profit boards, the Chula Vista Veterans Home Board, the San Diego USO, and I don't do that, for myself. I mean, okay, I'm a part of a team doing that, but it's an honorable thing to do, to give back to your community. It's an honorable thing to serve others. And so, to me, honor is doing the right thing. And when you make a mistake, to admit it and move past that and grow as a person in an honorable manner is, I don't know, I'm trying to kind of stumbling here, but you get my point, is that there's honor in doing things, even the slightest thing can have honor in it if you do it for the right reasons. And all these young sailors that are serving today, and the officers, and all of them, they're serving honorably, and it's. And I'm rambling here. I'm sorry.
Not in the least, Jack.
That was our motto from our POW experiences, was to return with honor, and that's what we thought we did. And we made a lot of mistakes throughout the POW experience, and some guys faltered, but they came back and they admitted that they made mistakes, so they were brought back into the fold of the honorable. There were, unfortunately, a few POWs who did not measure up and did not acknowledge that they did not perform well, and told lies and various things, and capitulated without even the slightest bit of torture or anything like that. That was not an honorable thing to do. And but the majority of the POWs, we came back with honor, and those that did not, they are the lepers of the POW experience. We don't talk with them. We don't talk about them, but we don't acknowledge them, and that's the difference between honor and dishonor. If you don't do the right thing, and when you do make a mistake, to be honorable and admit it and continue from that point on. I don't know.
I'm near the very end of what I want to do. I wanted to just get a little bit, one of the examples of the lowly performing in service of his country is Doug Hegel, and you mentioned him earlier with respect, and just a little bit about your...
Well, I didn't, I was never in with Doug. Obviously, he left the POW experience before I joined it, and but I've known him afterwards when he was worked in the survival school instructor, and I would go over there occasionally and give debriefs about my POW thing. And here's a guy who you talk about a guy who, of all things, I mean, we were flying over there. You might be expected that you might be shot down and become a POW. But this poor guy, he is thrown off the ship in the middle of the night and ends up there. No way that he should have ever been expected to be there. And yet he was one of the key elements of the POW experience where he came back and he was a data dump of what was going on. And his performance, you talk about honorable, his performance and what he did and what he contributed to help the other POWs that were still there and soften things up for us FNGs, as new guys coming in there, is incalculable, I think. He was just, and he was so humble. And he didn't feel like, he was just, I think he said he was the something about chiefs and Indians. He was the lone Indian among a bunch of chiefs. And it's just remarkable. And you talk about humble. And this guy's a very humble individual. But what he contributed to the POW experience was wonderful, I think.
And do you know some of the examples of what he contributed when he got back?
Yeah, well, he became a memory bank. He had a remarkable ability to remember names and he became a memory bank and he memorized all of the names of all the known POWs that were in captivity at the time of his release, and he had them in his memory, and he would repeat. And he came back. He gave this data dump, and I've never heard him do it, but I know about it. He had memorized it in sort of a rhyme, like old MacDonald's had a farm type thing, and then he came back and he regurgitated that to the intelligence people about, Abbott, Baker, and each name would come down. And if you stopped him, he'd have to go back and start again because it was memorized and he had it down there. And he brought back names of guys who were still listed as MIA or in some cases KIA, I think, even killed in action and missing in action. And he brought back them who were actually POWs, and the first time that their families knew for sure that they were POW. And he was just and he brought back information about the torture and the treatments and the stuff that was going on that the Vietnamese had led the world to believe wasn't happening. So he, and about the same time, the Wives League and all this stuff started putting public pressure on the Vietnamese, which actually helped improve the conditions and the treatment of the POWs at that time. So that perfect storm, I hate that word, but it's kind of a perfect storm where Doug's information coming back and the wives not sitting down and being quiet little girls. Now don't bother us. We're the State Department. We know what we're doing. Yeah, all right. And that really was a turning point, I think, in the way the treatment of the POWs started improving there. So, yeah, Doug's quite a guy and humble guy. Unfortunately, he's kind of now he's retired from the civil service. He's kind of just become a recluse. He's not walking around looking, hey, look at me. He's a guy that you really got to talk to.
Thank you, Jack. That's it for my questions. Is there
Okay.
anything else that I didn't cover that you would have liked to have talked about or thought about?
No, I guess we talked about well, back to, we were talking about how today that those that are going out there in harm's way need to share that with their families and talk about it and let them know what's going on. Don't just keep it there. And I don't mean that they should just dwell on it, but it ought to be brought out. And they certainly can't. They can't take it with them either and concentrate on it. They've got a job to do out there. Like we said, you got to be good at compartmentalizing, and you put that stuff away, lock it up in that compartment in your brain that don't deal with it when you're trying to do your job out there, but don't just ignore it. And once you've got time to stop and think about it, unlock that compartment and deal with those problems. I always said that when that canopy closed, okay, that I was in my office. That was for business. You didn't have time for anything else because it was serious business. And when the cockpit opened again and got out, okay, I'm off work now. I can think about these things. I can think about the problems with the car or the washing machine's not working. And she wrote me the letter about, well, we just had a blowout and this or that, and the washing machine quit. You don't want to be thinking about that stuff while you're flying. So when a cockpit closes, you're in your office, you're there for business, it's serious business. And when the cockpit comes open, okay, you get out of your office, and then you can open that lock box and deal with those things. And so that's sometimes I think is a trait that you have to develop if you don't. And I think naval aviation, they train us to do that, to compartmentalize, and if you can do it properly, just because otherwise you're mixing the two and you're not going to do either one very well.
Beautiful, Jack. Okay, so we cut and get room tone? Separate?
Yep,
Let's,
so we have to record 30 seconds of just silence to allow them to enter, yeah, exactly. And try not to breathe too heavily, because we can hear you breathing.
well, I'm gonna cut first,
Okay.
and then we start up again and get
All
room
right,
tone.
so I'm gonna cut, well, give me the tone.
Hold on.